The galaxy trembled beneath the iron fist of the Kearvor, an alien species whose armada had ravaged countless star systems. Their ships were vast, looming behemoths bristling with weaponry, blotting out entire planets as they imposed their will on weaker civilizations. For centuries, the Kearvor had known nothing but victory. Empires collapsed in their wake, entire species bent to their will, their conquests without end or serious opposition. At the heart of their domination was their flagship, the Annihilator, a monstrous warship and symbol of the Kearvor's unchallenged reign. The mere sight of it spread terror. Its presence signaled that resistance was not only futile, but suicidal. Aboard the Annihilator, the Kearvor leaders convened, as they always did before a conquest. The great war table displayed the galaxy's layout, flickering with details of their most recent victories. On the edge of the map, a small system came into view, the Sol system. "They call themselves humans," one officer sneered, the elongated ridges of his face twisting in disdain. "Insignificant creatures, nothing more than insects." The others chuckled. Humans were a curiosity, a minor race in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The Kearvor had never bothered with them before. There had been no need. But now, word had come that the humans had formed a defense, sent a warship to challenge the Kearvor fleet. "They dare send a single ship?" Another officer laughed. "Are they mad? Or merely desperate?" The Kearvor viewed humanity with utter contempt. To them, the humans were a primitive species, a weak race unworthy of serious consideration. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, all laughably inferior to the mighty Kearvor. It was a view shared not only by the Kearvor themselves but by the countless other species they had subjugated over the centuries. In the darkened corridors of Kearvor's slave ships and conquered worlds, the enslaved races whispered among themselves. There was no hope for the humans. None. The Kearvor had crushed far greater powers with ease. What chance did the humans have? The galaxy had fallen into despair long ago, the spirit of resistance broken under the relentless heel of Kearvor domination. A grizzled old warrior from a conquered race murmured in chains, "If the humans are sending a single ship, it's not bravery, it's foolishness. They'll be destroyed before they even fire a shot." Another species, long broken by the Kearvor, watched in silent sorrow. These beings knew firsthand what fate awaited the humans. They had lived through the endless massacres, seen their planets turned to ash, their cities obliterated. None could stand against the Kearvor, not now, not ever. And yet, as news spread across the galaxy, some faint, unspoken hope flickered in the hearts of those enslaved. Perhaps the humans, in their ignorance or madness, might at least hurt the Kearvor, even if it meant their own destruction. The galaxy had long since abandoned dreams of freedom, but there was something about this act of defiance, this lone ship hurtling towards the Kearvor fleet, that stirred the imagination of the downtrodden. The Kearvor, of course, had no such thoughts. To them, the humans' gesture was pathetic. A single warship? They had entire fleets at their disposal, fleets capable of wiping out planets in mere hours. This was going to be a slaughter, and they would make an example of these humans. A transmission came in, crackling with information from their outer patrols. A single human ship, they reported, was indeed approaching the Kearvor's primary fleet. The UNS Phantom, as it was called. A sleek but small warship compared to the gargantuan vessels of the Kearvor. It didn't even register as a threat. "They bring us such a toy." General Thrax, the commander of the Kearvor fleet, scoffed as he reviewed the incoming data on the human ship. "Do they think their tiny vessel stands a chance against the Annihilator?" The officers gathered around, some still laughing, others more interested in how quickly the battle would be over. "We'll destroy them before they get within range of our cannons," said one of the Kearvor captains. His voice, like the others, was laced with absolute certainty. "Let's not be too hasty," Thrax interrupted, his voice a deep, guttural growl. "I want to make sure these humans are made into a lesson. Let the galaxy see what happens to those foolish enough to defy us. We'll toy with them. Break them slowly. Let their signal scream out into the void before we crush them utterly." The room hummed with dark amusement at Thrax's suggestion. The Kearvor were not only conquerors, they were sadists. They enjoyed breaking the spirit of their enemies before finally delivering the killing blow. And the humans, with their laughable defiance, were about to become the latest example of Kearvor superiority. Meanwhile, aboard the Phantom, a very different atmosphere prevailed. The human ship cut through the void with silent purpose. It was small, yes, but it was far from what the Kearvor expected. Hidden beneath its sleek, unassuming exterior was a technological marvel, one the Kearvor had never seen before. The Phantom was not a warship designed for brute force. It was a ship designed for precision, for strategy, for the kind of warfare the Kearvor had long since forgotten. The crew of the Phantom was calm, focused. There was no panic, no fear, only determination. At the helm was Commander Sarah Cross, a veteran of countless skirmishes and a master tactician. She knew exactly what they were up against, and she knew how to win. "The Kearvor won't see it coming," Cross said, her voice steady as she reviewed the final battle preparations. "They've grown arrogant. They've grown blind. That's their weakness." The Kearvor, in their arrogance, saw a lone human ship, a minor inconvenience. What they didn't see was the trap that was being set for them. The Phantom continued its steady approach toward the Kearvor fleet, its engines humming quietly in the vastness of space. Back aboard the Annihilator, the Kearvor fleet made final preparations for what they believed would be a quick and decisive slaughter. General Thrax barked orders to his fleet, preparing his forces for a crushing display of power. He wanted to savor this. "There'll be nothing but space debris by the time we're done." Thrax grinned, his fangs gleaming in the dim light of the command bridge. The Kearvor's ships, vast and brimming with weaponry, loomed like hungry predators as the Phantom drew nearer. They had no idea what was coming. The UNS Phantom cut through the cold darkness of space, its sleek hull barely reflecting the distant starlight. Small by warship standards, it moved with quiet precision, a predator disguised as prey. Its true strength was not in size or outward firepower, but in the advanced technology embedded deep within its systems. On the outside, the Phantom appeared to be just another small human vessel. But inside, it was anything but ordinary. Commander Sarah Cross stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the tactical display. She exuded calm authority, every gesture precise and deliberate. Around her, the crew worked in silent efficiency, a reflection of her leadership. There was no room for nerves here. They knew exactly what they were facing and what they had to do. The Kearvor didn't scare them. If anything, they were more focused than ever. "Status report," Cross said, her voice even. "All systems optimal," came the reply from her tactical officer, a calm professional who had seen his share of battles. "Weapons are charged and standing by. Cloaking system online." Cross gave a single nod, her confidence unshaken. They had trained for this. They knew the odds, but that was what made humans different. The Kearvor were about to find out. Outside, the vastness of the Kearvor fleet loomed ahead. Massive battleships, bristling with weapons, dwarfing the Phantom in every sense. Their flagship, the Annihilator, dominated the horizon, a floating fortress that symbolized the Kearvor's dominance. From a distance, the human ship was barely a speck against the massive Kearvor armada. To any outside observer, it seemed like an impossible confrontation, a single ship against an empire's might. Inside the Annihilator, General Thrax sneered at the display before him. He could barely contain his amusement at the sight of the tiny human ship approaching his mighty fleet. "They think they can fight us with that?" he growled, his voice heavy with contempt. "Humans! Pathetic!" He motioned to his communications officer. "Open a channel." Moments later, his voice boomed across the void, transmitted to the Phantom. "Humans, you are facing the might of the Kearvor. We offer you this one chance. Surrender now, and you will be spared a slow death. Resist, and we will crush you, just like all the others before you." The bridge of the Phantom remained quiet as the message played. Not a single member of the crew reacted. They had heard worse. Commander Cross listened with the same calm that had carried her through a lifetime of battles. When the message ended, she turned to her communications officer. Transmit our response. Her voice, cool and composed, echoed across the void, reaching the ears of the Kearvor. General Thrax, this is Commander Cross of the UNS Phantom. There will be no surrender. You will be held accountable for your crimes against the galaxy. Prepare yourselves. The Kearvor officers laughed at her defiance. Thrax leaned back in his command chair, a cruel grin spreading across his face. They really believe they can fight us, he said to his lieutenants. Ready the fleet. Let's show them how wrong they are. Back on the Phantom, the crew continued their silent preparations. Cross had expected the taunts. She knew the Kearvor wouldn't take them seriously. That was their weakness. Her team was ready, not for a direct fight, but for a battle of strategy and precision. They weren't going to overpower the Kearvor, they were going to outthink them. Tactical, are the coordinates locked? Cross asked. Locked and ready, Commander. We're in position. The plan was simple. The Kearvor, blinded by their arrogance, believed they were invincible. The Phantom wasn't built for brute strength but for tactical superiority. They would exploit the Kearvor's overconfidence, using advanced maneuvers and technology the Kearvor didn't even know existed. They won't know what hit them, Cross muttered to herself. On the tactical display, the Kearvor fleet began to move. Dozens of ships, all larger and more heavily armed than the Phantom, started to spread out, preparing to surround and overwhelm the lone human vessel. The Kearvor had won hundreds of battles this way, by overwhelming their enemy with sheer force. But the Phantom wasn't like any ship they'd encountered before. Begin Phase 1, Cross ordered. The Phantom glided forward, still seemingly insignificant compared to the hulking Kearvor ships. Yet, as it moved, subtle shifts in its trajectory began to confuse the enemy's sensors. The Kearvor's targeting systems faltered, unable to lock onto the small vessel. Cloaked in advanced stealth technology, the Phantom was moving into an advantageous position, unseen and unnoticed by the Kearvor. They've lost us, the tactical officer confirmed. Good. Execute Phase 2, Cross said. With a series of rapid commands, the Phantom began to deploy a series of decoy signals, tricking the Kearvor into believing they were targeting multiple ships, when in reality, they were still only dealing with one. The Kearvor fleet, used to overwhelming numbers, began to spread their firepower across what they thought were several human ships. In doing so, they left themselves exposed. Inside the Annihilator, General Thrax frowned as his targeting systems began to fail. He slammed his fist into the console. What is happening? Where are they? His officers scrambled to make sense of the situation, but it was too late. The Phantom had moved into its final position. Phase 3, Cross said quietly, her voice calm. The ship's advanced targeting systems locked onto key Kearvor vessels, aiming for weak points in their defenses that the Kearvor, in their arrogance, had never bothered to fortify. A single barrage was fired, but instead of targeting the larger ships head-on, the Phantom hit critical systems, engines, shield generators, and power cores. The Kearvor ships, built for brute force, couldn't handle the precision strikes. One by one, key ships in the Kearvor fleet began to falter. Their engines sputtered, their shields failed, and their formations collapsed into chaos. Inside the Annihilator, General Thrax watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by a single ship. They're destroying us, one of his officers whispered in shock. Thrax, for the first time in his long career, felt a chill of fear. He had underestimated these humans. The battle erupted with the ferocity the Kearvor had promised, but it was not the straightforward slaughter they had expected. With an ear-splitting roar, the Kearvor unleashed the full might of their weaponry. Beams of energy lanced through space, massive missiles streaked toward the Phantom, and explosions lit the void. The sheer firepower unleashed was overwhelming, the kind that had wiped out entire fleets in the past. To the Kearvor, this was how battles were won, through brute force, through overwhelming superiority. But the UNS Phantom was no ordinary opponent. As the Kearvor's first salvo neared, the Phantom vanished from sight. It shimmered for a split second, then disappeared completely, cloaked in a field that rendered it invisible to the Kearvor's sensors. The barrage of firepower sailed harmlessly through empty space, missing their target entirely. The Kaarvor's officers blinked in confusion, unable to comprehend how their perfect assault had struck nothing. General Thrax snarled from the bridge of the Annihilator. "Where are they? Find them!" But the Phantom had already reappeared, moving with silent precision. The humans weren't interested in a direct fight. They didn't need one. While the Kaarvor were blasting away with raw power, the Phantom was picking them apart with surgical precision. Commander Cross sat in her command chair, her expression calm and focused. "Target the primary reactors," she said evenly. "Fire on my mark." Her crew worked flawlessly, their fingers flying across the consoles, executing the carefully planned strikes. The Phantom's advanced weaponry, powered by technology the Kaarvor couldn't even fathom, delivered pinpoint strikes to the weakest points of the Kaarvor's ships. Shield generators blinked out, engines exploded in fireballs, and power cores melted under the precision of the human attacks. The first Kaarvor battleship erupted in flames, its structure buckling before it collapsed in on itself. The rest of the Kaarvor fleet hesitated for a moment, their confidence suddenly shaken. And then another ship went down. And another. The Kaarvor, so used to overpowering their enemies, were now finding themselves on the losing side of a battle they had never anticipated. "This is impossible!" one of Thrax's lieutenants stammered as the display filled with red icons, signifying their ships were being systematically destroyed. Thrax's confidence began to crumble. His mighty fleet, the terror of the galaxy, was being torn apart by a single human vessel. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation, but the humans' tactics were unlike anything the Kaarvor had ever faced. The Phantom didn't fight like any opponent they had encountered before. It moved too fast, struck too precisely, and its cloaking and countermeasures made it impossible for the Kaarvor to retaliate effectively. "They're picking us apart," another officer said, fear creeping into his voice. Thrax slammed his fist onto the control panel. "Retarget! Focus all firepower on their last known position." The Kaarvor ships turned, launching another barrage of devastating firepower. But once again, the Phantom was gone. Cloaked, moving unseen, it darted through the battlefield like a ghost, reappearing only to deliver its killing blows. Each shot from the Phantom was calculated, tearing through the Kaarvor ships with surgical efficiency. Their mighty fleet, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was now reduced to chaos. On the bridge of the Annihilator, Thrax's hands shook with disbelief. He had never imagined the Kaarvor could be defeated, let alone by a single human ship. His empire, his fleet, was crumbling before his eyes. "Commander, they're breaking formation," Cross's tactical officer reported. "Good. Press the advantage," Cross replied coolly. "Target their flagship." The Phantom closed in on the Annihilator, unseen until it was too late. The Kaarvor's mighty flagship, the heart of their fleet, was exposed. The humans wasted no time. A barrage of high-energy blasts erupted from the Phantom, piercing the Annihilator's shields and slamming into its hull. The flagship shuddered violently, its lights flickering as critical systems began to fail. Thrax staggered as the bridge shook. Alarms blared, and his officers scrambled to regain control, but it was no use. The flagship was dying. "We can't hold this position," one of his lieutenants cried. Thrax clenched his fists, rage and disbelief mixing into a potent fury. How could this have happened? How could a single human ship have done this? But even as he struggled to make sense of it, reality was closing in. His fleet was shattered, his forces in full retreat. They had been utterly defeated. "Order the retreat," Thrax growled, his voice low and venomous. "Fall back. Get us out of here." The remains of the Kaarvor fleet, once so confident, now limped away from the battlefield, their numbers decimated. The Annihilator, barely holding together, managed to slip into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of what was once an unstoppable force. As silence returned to the battlefield, the crew of the Phantom took a breath. The battle was over. They had won. "Enemy retreat confirmed, Commander," the tactical officer said quietly. "The field is ours." Cross nodded slowly, her face betraying no emotion. The victory had been decisive, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Kearvor were not completely defeated, only humiliated. They would retreat, regroup, and come back. But for now, humanity had struck the first blow. A soft beep broke the quiet. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. High Command is requesting a report." Cross stood, straightened her uniform, and walked toward the communications console. She knew what they would say. They would congratulate her, celebrate the victory, and hail it as the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. But in her mind, she was already thinking ahead, to the battles still to come, to the war that was far from over. She opened the channel, her voice as calm as ever. "This is Commander Cross. Mission accomplished." Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. Species that had been crushed under the Kearvor's rule heard the reports in disbelief. The humans, a race many had seen as insignificant, had defeated the Kearvor fleet with a single ship. Hope, long dormant, flickered to life once again. In dark corners of the galaxy, the Kearvor licked their wounds. Their pride shattered, but their spirit far from broken. This was not the end. For humanity, and for the galaxy, it was only the beginning.